Everybody, Lieutenant Joe here for the Blue Heart Podcast, back once again. My special guest again is Captain Steve Neal from Chesterfield PD. Steve is an author. He's got two amazing books out there, Toxic Boss Blues, which you can find on Amazon, and also Bearing Witness to Evil. Now, the book Bearing Witness to Evil, the reason that's important, we've covered a couple of chapters in that book in a couple of our episodes because it's really very interesting. We're going to cover another one today. But first, I want to remind everybody about our sponsors. All right, we have Blue 360 Media, the greatest publisher of all time for law enforcement materials. Go there and check stuff out. They got my books there, but they have lots and lots of other stuff. And medicalessentialdiagnostics.com. They are a New Jersey-based company for any New Jersey state employee, county, local employee. You go there, you get a full soup to nuts medical treatment. You can also bring two adult people with you, two adult family members. No cost to you. All the costs are covered. You go in, find out that you're healthy so you can enjoy your career and then you can enjoy your retirement. medicalessentialdiagnostics.com and blue360media.com. Now, for everybody else, I get your emails, you're liking the show, you're enjoying the people we're bringing on. Do me a favor, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button so that we continue to build here at the Blue Heart Podcast. So, Steve, welcome back again. I'm glad to have you here.
Hey, Joe, nice to see you again.
So today we're going to talk about one of the chapters from your book, Bearing Witness to Evil. And the title of the chapter is Smoke, which is actually a nickname, what I understand, of a particular suspect. Why don't you tell us what Smoke was all about?
Well, I want to start you off with a little story. I think some of your listeners will enjoy it because they probably have experienced something similar in their law enforcement career. But I had been on the department maybe 9 or 10 years. I was a sergeant in uniform. And one day I got a message that said, go see the chief. And I was like, what? I mean, we were at a large agency. We didn't have interaction with the chief. You just didn't talk to him or anything like that. Something was up when you went to see him. So I went in, sat down with the chief, and he said, we're getting ready to make some transfers and assignments. And I was thinking about transferring you to this covert investigative unit. And he says, what do you think about that? Are you interested in doing a covert job? And I said, well, Chief, are you asking me or are you telling me? And he said, oh, I'm asking you. He said, I want to know. And I said, well, I really don't have much interest in that. I said, I've never done it. No experience in it whatsoever. I really don't have a lot of interest in doing covert work. And his response was, well, fine. Report there at 8 o'clock on Monday. That's where you'll be.
So you were voluntold.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have probably experienced that, but bless him, because as it turns out, I did 5 years in that assignment, and it was absolutely my favorite assignment, bar none, and the job where I had the most fun, and the job where I felt like I had the most impact. We put a lot of bad guys in prison.
That's fantastic. It's something sometimes you don't know what you're going to get into. I always wanted to be in the detective bureau, and I did my time on the road, and I got put in the bureau, and I absolutely loved every single minute of it. The next 12, 13 years, whatever it was absolutely amazing. I made rank in the bureau, and I liked that even better because then I could not only do investigations, but I could bring in good detectives, good men and women who would really be good investigators. But when I got promoted to lieutenant, one of the things that the chief said to me, he goes, hey, I'm thinking of putting you in charge of training. You have all this experience. We think training would be great for you. I don't know about training. I like kicking doors, arresting bad people. He goes, yeah, that's great. So you're going to love the training as well. So you're in charge of training now. And it turned out not only did I like it, I really took to it real well. And I created my business, Pangaro Training, because of that incident. So you never know where this police road is going to take you when you're doing these jobs.
I think that's the lesson for the young guys and for the listeners. Sometimes you might think no, but as it turns out, that might be the best thing that ever happened to you.
Right. So bring us into the story of Smoke here in the unit that you're in.
Let me give you a little bit of background on that particular case. I was in that covert unit. Our job was surveillance, and we targeted career criminals or, high-risk fugitives, that type thing, people that we knew were active and multiple offenders in our jurisdiction, but they just didn't quite have enough to make a case on them. So in this particular case with Smoke, we were having a series of nighttime burglaries, and they were happening right on the city and county jurisdictional line, which was common. Now, as you know, the nighttime burglar is a little bit different than the daytime burglar, because typically the daytime burglar doesn't want anybody to be there. They don't want confrontation. They want to steal their items and get on out of there. The nighttime burglar is a little bit different. And this guy in particular, our suspect, was going in the middle of the night, making sure that people were home. He made sure that they knew he was there. He would stand at the foot of the bed, or he would rub their legs. Sometimes he'd talk to them, or whatever it happened to be the case. He was a creep, and he made sure they knew he was in their home in the middle of the night and woke them up. And then he would take items from the home, and he would usually carry them in a pillowcase or something that he had taken from the home. And after he woke them up and scared them half to death, he would flee out of the house. So that's a situation that we started with. And our jurisdiction, we had a large number of them in two different neighborhoods, again, right on the city and county jurisdictional line. But as it turns out, in meeting with crime analysts from other jurisdictions, Richmond City was also having the same problem on their side of the line. So we started adding them up, and we had well over 20 nighttime burglaries that had happened over a relatively short period of time. Well, the crime analysts, good for them, they had identified a potential suspect who lived close by in the area. He was one of those guys, career criminals. You know, he had his rap sheet like that, longer than your arm. So his history was a burglary, and he had a brother who was in a penitentiary for nighttime burglary and rape. So we kind of thought he might be a good suspect. Well, it turns out he didn't have an automobile, and he lived not too far. He lived less than a mile from where these burglaries were happening, but he didn't have an automobile. So it kind of set us in a situation where we had to figure out an operational plan.
Interesting. The surveillance unit. So I'm making notes here as you go, and I think about, you say that it happened on the county and the city line, and this is an important thing for people out there in supervision, in detective bureaus and investigative units. When you have this kind of a crime, this is a unique thing. A cat burglar, somebody that comes in the night when people are home, is a unique kind of criminal. And I know you mentioned that, and it's absolutely true. That person is putting the entire family or whoever lives in that place in great danger, because now you have people there and they're sleeping, they're vulnerable. You can go around, and obviously we know over the years children have been kidnapped out of the house. We've had people sexually assaulted when they're in the night. So this is a dangerous individual, whether they intend to do all those bad things. But in your guy, in this case of the guy named nicknamed Smoke, is that he goes in there and he's touching people and he's doing different kind of things to let them know he's there. That could be a confrontation, right? Homeowner has a weapon or has something go on, and it could turn out really, really bad. One of the things I suggest is that if you have these kind of crimes where you start to see that maybe they cross over a border, you should put together a task force, at least to sit down and discuss cases. I mean, we've done that in our agency. We had certain kinds of crimes. We had a guy going around, a cat burglar at night, and he was sexually assaulting 75, 85-year-old women, and they laid in their bed. And when we talked to the surrounding towns, after we had 3 or 4 of them, we found that they were having them also, and we put together a burglary task force. We eventually caught the guy in the act of doing this, but it turns out there wasn't 3, there was about 10 or 11 of these incidents, and we worked together with them. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. If you have stuff like this on a border, talk with those other agencies, see what else is going on, combine efforts and resources if you can.
And that's exactly what happened in this case. Our analyst had met, and that's how they identified Smoke. His name was Coleman, Donald Coleman. That's how they identified him as a potential suspect. So our covert team and Richmond's covert team got together, and we were going to work it jointly, just like you're talking about, because we knew it was going to be labor intensive. We knew he was going to be out on foot. He didn't have an automobile. He didn't drive. So catching a cat burglar who's going in houses in the middle of the night on foot is a tall order. So first thing I did, I was new to the unit at the time. In fact, this was one of the first cases, maybe the first or second case that I had been the supervisor in this particular unit on. I was a sergeant. And I had met with the guys right off the bat and told them, look, I don't know anything about covert work. I've never done it. You guys are going to have to teach me. Now, I know a lot about supervision and leadership. I said, I'll take care of that part in the early going. But I said, you're going to have to teach me how to do surveillance because I just never had any exposure to it. So that's what we were doing. So case came up against Smoke, and I sat down with the guys from both the jurisdictions, and I was in charge of the investigation. And I asked them for input. I said, how are we going to work this guy? What do you guys suggest? What do you think we ought to do to put our plan together? And they told me to a person, both jurisdictions, he can't be done. They said he can't be done. He's too good. And they said, we've tried to do him before. He doesn't drive. He's on foot. He's stealth. The guy is slick. One of the best criminals we've ever gone up against. And they said, we couldn't do him before and he can't be done. And I said, no. I said, he can be done. We just got to figure out to be better than he is. So what we did, we hatched a plan, and I took all the guys up in the daytime the next day, and we did an on-foot scout mission. Because where the crimes were happening, it seemed to be some railroad tracks between them in the woods, and the railroad tracks were near his house. So we theorized that he was using the railroad tracks to travel at night, and then he would veer to the left to do a job in the county or veer to the right to do a job in the city. That was our theory. So we went up there in the daytime to confirm that and to get eyes on what we were going to be faced. And that's what we did. We spent the whole day basically just walking those tracks, walking between the two jurisdictions, getting the lay of the land and figure out where we were going to set up and so forth for the nighttime. The detectives, I got to be honest with you, since I was fairly new in the unit, they were looking at me kind of like, I don't know about this guy. I mean, we've never done anything like this before. I mean, they've already told me we can't do him. He's too good. We can't catch him. So there was a little bit of skepticism, and I could tell it. But I was determined that we were going to get this guy. It was going to be a feather in our cap. So anyway, once we did our scout mission, we spent a whole day doing that, got everybody familiar. Then we set up our teams. And of course, we had guys in the woods. We had night scopes, and we scattered them out along the railroad tracks between where the crimes were happening. It was about a 2-mile piece between a suspect's home and where the crimes were happening in the neighborhood, between a mile and 2 miles. So we had set up locations spread out. We had about 4 or 5 guys in the woods with night scopes. That was the only night scopes we had. And the rest of the guys went apprehension team and so forth. We had K9. We made a pretty good plan. Thought it was pretty good. Well, it was January, and as you know, in January it's cold, and it's cold at night, and some nasty weather. So the guys weren't real happy about being out in the woods all night or late at night to begin with. But they were giving me a chance and looking at me with a little skepticism. So first night, we were up in the woods. Nothing happened. We were working till 4 in the morning. We worked 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. shift. We figured that would give us the best chance of catching the guy. So we sat out there in the cold all night. First night, nothing happened, as often the case when you're doing surveillance. Second night, nothing happening until about midnight. About midnight, one of our detectives in the woods hears a woman let out a blood-curdling scream. So he knew something was up. We had a good idea. Our boy was in somebody's house, but we had no idea where. We didn't even know what street it was on. There was 2 subdivisions that backed up to these railroad tracks in this wooded area. But we knew it was coming from the county side, from the Chesterfield side, from where the scream was coming. So I dispatched the covert guys I had left to go over there and see what they could find. And everybody else, we just sat tight. And that's what I told them. I said, just hang tight where we are, because if our theory is right, and if Smoke is our suspect, then we're going to see him along those railroad tracks before too long. So sure enough, we sat there for a few minutes, and you hear the alert tones go out, communications, the dispatch, burglary in progress, such and such address, da-da-da-da-da-da. So again, I tell the guys, I said, just be patient. He's coming. He's coming. So sure enough, that's what we did. It wasn't more than maybe a couple of minutes. One of our detectives comes on the radio, covert radio, and goes, I got him. I said, he's sitting on the track smoking a cigarette. And he was dressed all in black. He had on black full over the head mask, and that's why people couldn't identify him from the previous burglaries, because they could see his eyes. But he always wore gloves, and he always was dressed all in black, so he didn't leave fingerprints, stuff like that. So all we have is a description of the guy. So one of the detectives says, "I got him. He's sitting on a track smoking a cigarette." Now, that detective was watching him, of course, from about 100 yards away through the night scope. And where he was sitting was about 150 to 200 yards from the actual location of where the burglary was. So, as you know, and as we talked about before, this guy was slick. And he knew to go and get himself out of the immediate area, but then sit tight. And for your listeners and for those who or do these type of investigations, they'll know that oftentimes if your bad guy is good, they know that the cavalry is coming to the scene of the crime. They know the police are coming. They know the police are going to search the area. They know the police are going to run the dogs and whatever it is you're going to do. So they'll get just far enough away that they think they can wait you out. And that's what he was doing. He was about 200 yards away, and he was just sitting there smoking a cigarette, taking his good old sweet time.
That's interesting. Now, there's a lot of lessons here for everybody that's listening and watching. So one of the things that I write about in a couple of the different books and magazines I write for, two things that you were talking about. What you're describing here, Steve, with this particular person, first of all, the type of crime is a signature crime. He's not doing burglaries during the day. He's doing them at night. So he's a cat burglar. So he already differentiated himself from other types of people. Your description at the end that he was wearing particular kind of clothing, gloves and a mask and everything else, tells you that he put a lot of thought into this to not be captured. So that's a pattern. He's got a pattern of how he attacks, what he does, where he goes, and his signatures are starting to pop out here. That he's touching people, he's going at night, he's wearing a certain kind of clothes, he's getting a certain number of feet away from the location, hunkering down to give time for the cops to do what they're doing, and then he can get away. So the concept of people having signature crimes is really very important, because you figure out how to do something. It doesn't have to be a crime in your life. You figure out how to do something, and once you figure out what works, what you're successful at, you repeat that over and over, and maybe you add some things to it as time goes, but you found a good working model for whatever it is. Well, criminals do the same thing. When you have a burglar, normally they do burglaries. Then you have robbers, street robbers do street robberies, right? They start to find their niche in the crime world. Doesn't mean they can't cross over to things, but they usually stick to what they know, and they get better and better at it. So signature crimes are when somebody does something in a particular way each time, and you can find those signatures in your crime scene, which can kind of lead you to maybe a suspect, or information that when you finally do get a suspect, only the suspect will know some of the things that happened because it was their things they did. Patterns are another thing that we found. We had lots of burglary sprees all over. We had wealthy areas, poor areas, industrial areas, and all of them got hit by different kinds of people that were going around doing these burglaries and thefts. And what we found was, if we looked very closely at it during a spree, our town, the other towns, if we looked at the crime scenes and we started to notice that all the houses, the high-end houses that were getting hit, they were getting hit between 8 o'clock in the morning and 10 o'clock. They were on corner properties. The things that were next to them were either woods or an area where other houses couldn't look into the yard and see somebody going into the yard. So what we would do is get all these facts together, we'd write it down and come up with our pattern, if we could find one, if we could discern a pattern, and then say, okay, let's set up our surveillance in this neighborhood, which matches where they've been hitting, and on this particular house or several houses that match the patterns of what they've been hitting. And we were successful, I would say, every single time. And that's a big thing to say, but it's true, because we understood how to investigate. So what you're talking about is actual legwork, going out there, walking those tracks. That's what you have to do. You got to put the time in to those kind of things. In a future episode, I'm going to talk about your crime scene a little bit more and how you look at it, but this is a perfect example. So my question that comes to my mind about your guy there, now he's sitting off on the railroad tracks, using those railroad tracks. That's a road. That's a roadway to go between neighborhoods. So I love that. That's great. How did you end up eventually approaching him? Did he have anything that was stolen? Did he hide that in case he got stopped? Would he go back for? What would he do? That's all the stuff that comes to my mind. So take us down the road.
Exactly. And you're exactly right with the patterns. And that it was what he was doing. And that's how we crafted our operational plan, because we knew what his signature was. And if, in fact, he was the suspect, then we knew where his starting and ending point would be. But we knew what his signature was, exactly what you said. That's how we crafted our operational plan. So, sure enough, we're sitting there after midnight. We had the burglary. He's sitting there on the track smoking a cigarette, just chilling. He waited for about 15 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes, and our guy was just sitting there. Our guy was about 70 yards from him. He never saw our guy at all. Of course, it was dark out, but watching him with the night scope. And then we had other detectives set up between his house and there. So I said, all right, you guys, we're going to watch him. The guys in the woods, y'all are watching them. You're going to track them, not on foot necessarily, but we're going to pass him off from one to another. So our guys set up to where when he was at one field, he was in somebody's vision, and then he would move 100 yards or whatever and be where somebody else could see him. And that's how we had set up. So we had them doing that. And then, of course, I established with the arrest team, and we got about a half a mile between where he was and where the his house was, and we set up an arrest team. And we set up on the tracks. It was so dark there that night, and in that location, you could barely see somebody standing next to you. I mean, if you put your hand out to the side, you might feel somebody there, but it was that dark. You could hardly see. So it was about 8 of us set up on the tracks. Of course, I had communications call the railroad and say, stop all trains, for the next hour or so. No train traffic down this way at all, because we didn't know how long it was going to take. So the arrest team with the multiple jurisdictions, we set up and waited on him, all hunkered down in the weeds, in the woods, right next to the railroad tracks. And we just waited, stealth and covert ourselves and quiet. And he slowly made his way along the tracks. And of course, we had headsets, we had earpieces, so we could talk to each other in whispered tones with the covert stuff. And we slowly made his way down the tracks. And when he got within about 15 of us, I said, let's go. And we jumped up from our positions down in the weeds, turned the lights on, rushed him, and took him into custody. And he was carrying the victim's pillowcase over his shoulder like a knapsack. He had the stolen goods in it. He was carrying it like Huck Finn or somebody, leaving the scene as he was walking away. And I'm gonna tell you, I got to be honest. It's the reason why it's one of my favorite cases. His body language and the look on his face, I could see the look on his face through his mask. He was absolutely dumbfounded. He had no idea that anybody was on him, and he was shocked that he got caught because he had done it. His plan was great. He was sneaking along the dark tracks at night, nobody around him. He had a good plan. We just happened to get one step ahead of him. So when made the apprehension, it felt good. I got to be honest with you, because we had well over 20 cases, as you said, multiple jurisdictions, high-end homes. We were concerned because of him breaking into houses at night and touching people and so forth. We were concerned that he would escalate to a higher level crime. And like I said, his brother was in prison for a nighttime rape, B&E rape at night. We were afraid that he was going to sexually assault or kill somebody in one of these cases. As you said in the beginning, the risk here was very high, and therefore, when we finally caught him, the reward was very high as well.
That's outstanding. And the lesson for everyone to take away from this is that, yeah, the guy was good. The guy had practice, because nobody was expecting these to happen. He figured out a plan. He figured out what to do, and he was successful. By the time law enforcement catches up sometimes to realize that, hey, there's a pattern here, that maybe these are related crimes, you start to look at what happens, what's said during the crime, what the actions, which door did they go in? Did they go through a window, a basement? Did they kick the door, shoulder the door, use a tool? All of these kind of things. You keep a spreadsheet when you think you have a spree going on, and you keep track of all of these things. And that's exactly what Captain Neal's team did, is they looked at those facts, which helped them to give them a plan. Because once law enforcement gets on, if you're a good investigator, you do all those things he talked about. Go walk them tracks. Go take a look around, see what's there, right? See what's going on. If he's smoking a cigarette and maybe you did have some sexual assaults or some other things that maybe you could pin him to, you could gather up those cigarette butts, and now you got DNA because you watched him smoke and he dropped them right there. You go pick that up. So the whole thing here is excellent police work. Happens once we have information and we think clearly and do good investigation. So, Steve, this was excellent, excellent work. I have my own stories along these lines too, and it is very exciting. It reminds me, I'd go out there right now and be a detective again if I could. So I want to thank you for being here again. Oh, there's my rescue dog saying goodbye to everybody. Keep in mind, the book is called Bearing Witness to Evil. Go find it on Amazon. There's all these stories in there. It's excellent and a lot more. And then Toxic Boss Blues from Captain Steve Neal from the Chesterfield, Virginia Police Department. Steve, thanks for being here, and we'll get you back on again.
Thanks, sir. Let's do it again.
All right, everybody. Remember, be part of the solution, not a part of the problem.